everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Sherry Pallas. Man, it's good to be back. I was really sick last week, and my voice may come in and out, but just deal with it. I'm doing so much better, and this is a plug for Tamiflu. Be sure to get Tamiflu if you get the flu. Okay, tonight I am chatting with Jamie Merich. We have similar backgrounds, and she has a book coming out in October titled You Lied to Me About God. How many of us can say that? Please remember to keep all comments and questions related to the show topic and that this is a safe space. Thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to all of your comments and questions. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you're on Facebook, grant StreamYard access so we can see your name when you have a comment or question. Let's give a huge shout out to our top sponsors, Ruth, Kirsten, Michelle, Ray, and Heidi. Thank you so very much. I appreciate your support. And if you would like to support me, you can go to sherrypallas.com. There you will find literally dozens of ways to do so for as little as $3 a month. Thank you in advance. I want to make an announcement, and he is back. He had a little thing. I lost my train of thought. Excuse me. I want to make an announcement and an introduction. Patrick Young is now helping with the show. Everybody meet Patrick. Say hi.
Hey.
He has been a huge help in booking shows, and we are now booked through September. Hit us up if you want to be on the show, or you think that someone else should be, or we should discuss something, or you have any new ideas. You can reach us both at firesidecreatorshow@gmail.com. Patrick, say hi to everyone.
Hi to everyone.
He has done a fantastic job, and we have a ton of shows coming up booked with some boss-ass people, and I have to thank Patrick for that, and the Wild Goose, of course. But thank you so much, Patrick. And so if you're getting an email or something like that, it's probably from him, but it's from both of us in between. So, Patrick, thank you so very much for your help, and someday I will pay you. Okay, I'm going to finish starting the show. Let's find Jamie. There she is. Okay. I appreciate you all. Let's meet our guest. Dr. Jamie Merich is a clinical counselor, trauma specialist, and author. She travels internationally speaking on topics related to trauma, disassociation, EMDR therapy, addiction, expressive arts, and spiritual abuse while maintaining a private practice and online education operation, the Institute for Creative Mindfulness in Akron, Ohio. She is the author of over 10 books in the field of trauma recovery. Her latest, You Lied to Me About God, a memoir, comes out October 15th. Everybody welcome Jamie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that warm welcome.
Thank you. Patrick, do you want to stay on, or do you want me to boot you off?
You can boot me.
Okay. Mwah! Thanks for all your help. Okay, Jamie, let's talk.
I've been excited for this since I met you at the Goose a few weeks ago.
Yes. I mean, the Goose is just such a community that we meet so many fantastic people, and I'm so glad to have met you. Thank you so much for introducing yourself and taking the video and all of that good stuff. You were phenomenal.
Oh, it's our great pleasure. And yes, we saw you at your Goosecast session where you were interviewing 3 brilliant people. And I was just very impressed with the conversation. And I kind of put out this wish to the universe. I'd love to talk to Sherry on her show. And here we are.
And here we are. I emailed you and said, let's chat. Let's do this. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
So your book's coming out. Let's give a little bit of a background on what exactly prompted this book, where it started, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so I am a writer in my field. I'm a clinical counselor by background, and I have about 10 or 12 books out, largely in the field of psychology and mental health. Most of my books are for other therapists. Several of my books, though, have a little more appeal for the general public, like Trauma and the 12 Steps and Dissociation Made Simple. And I've been teaching on spiritual abuse as an educator in the field for about 15 years. Amongst therapists, I was talking about it when not a lot of other therapists were talking about it because it was so core to my story. And I knew that in order to write a book on spiritual abuse, religious trauma, which folks started asking me for who followed my work, I had to get personal with it because this is such a personal experience to me.
Yeah.
So I survived not one, but two high demand Christian religions at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And
What do you mean by two different high demands? So evangelicals and
Catholic. I'll explain how it happened. So my parents were Roman Catholic when they got married. And then when I was about 5 years old, my father was converted by the likes of Jimmy Swaggart, Jim Baker, and became an Assemblies of God evangelical in the mid-'80s. And so some of my first memories were of going to Catholic church together with my parents, and they both played in the choir, and it was a lovely experience because music is the one thing we liked at both churches, really.
Yeah.
So, and then all of a sudden, because as a kid, I wasn't aware of what was going on, really. It was Dad's not coming to church with us anymore when I was about 5. And then I have memories of how tense things were around his conversion because at least the way he practiced evangelicalism, Catholics were going to hell. That was regularly stated in our house. And my mother stayed very firm in her Catholic faith. And they stayed married because she did not believe in divorcing, and he was hell-bent on converting her. And I was the oldest hero child in the middle of this whole mix, trying to make both of them happy. So I literally went to 2 churches on Sunday morning for most of my childhood. I'd go to 9 o'clock Catholic Mass. So I went to Catholic school as well for 9 years. And then Dad would pick me up at the side of the church in his van and drive me across town. And then later my brother to the Assemblies of God church, where it started with Sunday school. And Sunday school could be fun for kids, but then it got where I was old enough to start going to services. And then by the time I was in high school, I was going to youth group as well. And that's the setup. And guess what? I'm queer, we're bisexual. And
really? Okay. Oh dear.
Knew that when we were about, I don't know, like 9, 10, 11 years old, first starting to have feelings and crushes, and obviously didn't have a safe enough space to explore that in the home we were in. And yeah, for a lot of years of our teenage years, early adulthood, just lived with who we really were, zipped in. And I think like a lot of people who listen to your show, things happened and realized couldn't live that way anymore.
Authenticity creeped in.
He's right.
So one of the things that really struck me in what I saw was that at 8 years old, you begged to die.
Yeah.
That really struck me because I have writings as a child for the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think that when my mom didn't, when she got cancer the second time, she refused chemo because she wanted to go meet Jesus.
Yeah.
The other way of saying that is suicide. That is not said outside of the church, but that's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. And this compulsion of focusing on the afterlife, I think, has in part so much suicidality that it becomes a part of our life. It becomes a part of our psyche where that's just a natural step, right? People who die are, they're with Jesus now. And
right.
It turns something that we should not be longing for into the goal, especially when it's imprinted on children.
Yes. And I would say the years when I was about 8, 9, 10, 11 in there, like middle of elementary school, middle school, was uniquely miserable. For some reasons that I get into in the book. Yet, since you brought it up, I had a conscious thought when I was about 9 years old, wouldn't it be great if I wasn't here anymore? And I had enough awareness at that point of what suicide was, having heard about it a little bit at school, at church at that point, and I knew it was bad. I knew that if you did it, you were going to hell. I'm sure that message was communicated to me by Dad and his church. So I did what any evangelical kid would do in that situation. Well, I'm going to go to hell if I kill myself. So let me just pray for the rapture.
Right. Exactly.
And I remember going to school every morning. I was in the 4th grade saying, please, Jesus, come back today. Let the rapture happen so that I don't have to live here anymore. And obviously, rapture anxiety is a whole other topic that I talk about in the book. Yet my first relationship with it was my way out. Having to go
My pastor used to say every Sunday, it could happen today. Just don't let it happen before football.
I'm sure I heard things like that too. That laughter's coming.
Yeah.
The rapture was just such a fixture in my house. And one of the stories I reflect on in the book is how rapture anxiety really crept in when the first Gulf War happened, or the Gulf War happened in 1991, because my dad just had so many beliefs about where these are the end times, and Saddam Hussein is rebuilding Babylon, and the rapture can happen at any time during this. And I remember being in the Southern Park Mall in Boardman, Ohio, near where I grew up, when the war officially started. And we were walking through the mall that night. My brother was a little kid and my mom. And there was a radio playing outside of Spencer's Gifts, because they used to have a radio playing to make the little dancing flower dance. That's a vivid memory. But everybody was huddled around the radio that night because we didn't have all the news on our phones yet. And the war had started, and I melted into a full-on panic attack right there in the mall, collapsed to the ground and everything, because I was sure this meant that the rapture was going to happen any second now, because this war had started. And my head went to, and my mom's not going to make it. My grandparents aren't going to make it. All these, because everyone else in my family was Catholic, just about. They're not going to make it. That was so drilled in to me already by the age of 11.
So it makes you wish for death. It makes you think that your loved ones are going to hell. As a child, it is so detrimental. It is it's borderline abusive, if not completely abusive, because there are things now.
Yeah.
I mean, I still get the thought when the roads are empty. Oh, hell.
Did I miss something? Yeah.
What's going on? But
was left behind.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, my mom got me all the videos and everything. In fact, only like 7 years ago, I tossed them. I took pictures of them first, and then finally just tossed them. Like, I'm not even keeping this shit in my house anymore.
Good for you.
Yeah, but I mean, to have those types of fears built into you, and it's totally counterproductive to Jesus, right? When you study Jesus, you think, how could he go from a lion to a lamb? How could he go from a shepherd to a dictator and a genocidal maniac? How, where do these things coincide? But when you're also taught, don't doubt us, or you're doubting God, again, as a child, it implants this destructive doomsday mentality on us.
Yes, to all of that. You may have seen us like shaking our head, just yep.
Well, when I saw your book, I'm like, oh, we are sisters. We are sisters in this. Yes,
for sure. Yeah, and I can reflect back on it now and laugh. And I'm grateful for that. Humor's been a big part of recovery. And I guess at the time I wasn't laughing because it was just my reality. I was living in it. And something that I like to make sure people are aware of when you look at spiritual abuse or religious trauma is I would just like you to be aware of the vulnerability of the child state. When you are a child and you are literally looking to your parents as God figures because they're providing you shelter and food or guardians. And you can't really question, because if you do, you're going to get in trouble somehow. At least that was me as a very young kid. I just had it ingrained that if I spoke up about any of this, I would be in a kind of trouble I had never seen before, and I would lose my salvation.
Yeah, I would have lost my mom.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, only in her death did I have the freedom to really go in and explore and really start learning. Because it was not only rejecting God, her God, that was abusive, destructive, isolatory, I mean, all of these things, it was also rejecting her. And so therefore, she would have rejected me even further. I think about that so much because she was so devoted. I still don't have a brain, by the way, people, so just excuse me. She was devoted to her religion, to her faith, to all of the ideology. And in retrospect and in examination, it was so far from Jesus, so far from the Gospels, so far from everything that Jesus came to teach, getting clouded, all of those things, that I have found love in leaving religion. And I think that's just ironic beyond measure. But I also would hope that if she was still here, that she would have seen that. I don't think she would have, because I think that she would be full MAGA right now. I think she would be defending everything, and also making Jesus a fighter and a warrior instead of the servant that he was.
My family's all still here, and that's where they're at. So it's crushing. I shouldn't say all of them are there to that level. My father certainly is, and so when things are happening in MAGA America right now, it saddens me, and none of it surprises me.
Right.
A lot of this MAGA terminology and talking about the deep state and conspiracies and et cetera, putting out the gay agenda, the Project 2025 lingo, like all of this is what my father was talking about in the 80s and early 90s. And I have come, I will give some folks credit, because as an adult, I've come to know a lot of people in various levels of connection who were in that evangelical Assemblies of God setting with me during that era. And I would say not everybody took it as extremely as my father did. I've really come to see in my own recovery and investigation that I think my dad had a pretty unique level of devotion. Yet it's scary now seeing that become so much more mainstream.
Right. Right. My ex was a Jew and MAGA. He laughed. And I would say to him, do you know that you're being indoctrinated into Christianity? Do you know that everything that you're believing is actually Christian evangelicalism, not anything to do with Judaism or anything like that? It's counterproductive and counterintuitive. And he just wouldn't even hear it. One of the things that we are asked to do when we're in that faith is to not think.
Yeah.
And I think that is where they get the power. We are just supposed to shut down, close our eyes, no, don't come at me. It may be sin. It may be one of those things.
Questions are bad. The pastor knows best.
Don't use the brain God gave you. Don't touch the body God gave you. Don't, all of these things all bring into our self-doubt. The irony is that they are so confident in their doubt. And that's one of the things that I said to Patrick before the show started. I was talking about this man, I was going to call him a gentleman, but he hasn't been a gentleman at all, saying, all of these really horrific things that he considers Jesus has. And I said to Patrick, I guess the hardest thing to do is to tell a cult member they're in a cult, because that's the first thing they deny. So how do you, in your expertise and in your line of business, dealing with these therapies, dealing with all of these things, how do you overcome it? Or is it just a matter of personal growth?
Well, I'll start with me, my experience with it, and then I can certainly give a little more professional insight, because I've worked with people of different faith beliefs and faith traditions and political affiliations over the years. You've mentioned the word doubt several times, and I'm really glad to hear it, because to me, doubts are incredibly holy.
Totally.
And I also have a component of the memoir, as if two Christian religions weren't enough. I also studied off and on for 5 years at a yoga ashram.
Nice.
And it was a beautiful experience overall, because the practice of yoga, like many things, changed my life. And like anybody who grew up a true believer, I wanted to learn everything I absolutely could.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a teacher at that ashram who would say things like, I'm trying to shortcut your doubts. I'm trying to shortcut your doubts, because I've always been that student who asks questions.
Mhm.
And I'm like, this sounds really familiar. This sounds like how I grew up. And it's not good, because my doubts in what I was being spoon fed eventually led me to the truth that set me free.
Right.
Which is that Jesus is love, God is love. I am made in their image. God can show up however they want. And even now, it's my doubt that keeps me seeking. It's my doubt that keeps me still interested in Christianity, because a lot of people know what I've been through. And even partners and friends are like, how can you still go to places like even Wild Goose and go to, because my brother's a priest, go to your brother's church services and be interested in holy things, because we're built for holiness and connection. And I think that's something I want everybody to understand about spiritual abuse, that I think one of the reasons it hits people like us harder is because we really yearn and crave for that connection.
Right.
And spirituality is our essence. And then when that is used dogmatically, and when the Bible is thrown at us literally, right? And then I won't even go down that rabbit hole, because I know you've done this with other guests. Just how it can be interpreted to serve the gains of the person who's preaching that particular scripture.
And that's what we see all over the place, right? I mean, I was called the Pharisee today.
You're doing it right then.
Right. But I mean, to one of the things that I found really important about the Goose this year is that all of the conversations, not the panels, not my show, but the actual conversations around our pool, and that I had with other people, is that what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I mean, one of the things that I think in one of the good conversations with David Hayward and everybody was that love is empathy, because love can be so misconstrued. I was taught that love was abusive. I was taught that love was controlling. So when you think that love is that, then you kind of fall in line with that. Then you resemble that. You portray that. You further that. But when you realize what love is, that's when you pull it back. So I think the best definition that we came up with was empathy. How would you interpret love now that you've gone through this whole process?
Wow, what a beautiful question. I think empathy is certainly a component of it. I mean, love is, wow, love this question. To me, it's so dimensional. It's hard to define simply. It's because you know this from theology, that there's different kinds of love that you can experience. Yet I think now that you've mentioned it, empathy is a core. Is a core of it. It takes
religion out of it, right? It takes God out of it. And it really, I mean, it kind of, and I don't mean this in a negative way anyway, but it dumbs it down to where we can say, okay, just care about your neighbor. When it says love your neighbor, what does that mean? Does that mean you need to convert your neighbor? Does that mean you need to reprimand? No, that means you need to care for your neighbor.
Yeah, I regard you as a fellow human that is a manifestation of divinity.
Right.
And yeah, I know we can get into this. Some people are harder to love than others in terms of...
Ooh, don't I know?
Yet, even when I think of it, and this is something I really do credit my yoga studies and yoga teaching, that we're not separate. We're all connected by something. And it's really just this burgeoning and this glow, like your fire, that I feel in my heart for humanity. And Yeah. So
And I think it should extend even further than humanity, right?
animals,
That
the
because
earth, yes.
yeah, because we've taken this stance of dominion again, that love is dominion and ownership and control and all that, because that's the way religion portrays God in a lot of circumstances. Don't at all me, people. I know nothing. There is no all in this universe,
Right.
but when you have that connection, when you have those types of things, that's what we look for. We have to learn about God, but we
Yes.
don't have to learn about that connection. That is instinctual. It is natural. It's literally from the point we are born to the moment we die, unless there's some type of mental illnesses or something like that. Again, not all.
And
But
as sorry, no, as we're talking about this, I'm just thinking, I certainly know what love is not.
there you go.
So let's unpack this a little bit, because I've often taught that when I can really learning what things are not. Like, one of my first jobs out of graduate school was horrible, was absolutely horrible. But I said that job taught me how not to be a counselor.
Right.
It taught me who I am as a counselor, as a therapist. So love is not fear. Love is not controlling. Love is not putting people down and calling them an abomination. And one of the reasons I ended up going with the title of the book, You Lied to Me About God, is in healing work, I just really started digging into all the lies I believed about myself. And that's one of my favorite definitions of shame. It's from Anais Nin. She said, shame is the lie someone told you about yourself. And as I've really contemplated, especially this core relationship of my life with my father, there were so many lies taught to me about God. And I can say that they are lies for me because in my own addiction recovery and my own ongoing work, I met a much different God. It was pure love. I have this line in the book and in a song I wrote to go along with the book saying, literally at the bottom of the bottle I was at, pure love reached in the form of the God of my understanding and found me as I am. Love meets you as you are. And I admit, in my humanity, that is difficult.
So
it's been difficult for me to see certain kinds of Christian lose their shit over the Last Supper, quote unquote, incident at the Olympics. Because it's like, please, just please, like, how small are you making your God that you can get offended by a pain? It wasn't even what you thought. Anyway, taking a breath.
Right.
So I am still a work in progress, learning how to be love and practice love and share love that is there. I was lied to about God, and I was told so many lies about myself in God's name. Yeah. And I think that's really the essence of what spiritual abuse and religious trauma is. And those of us who are queer, who are free thinkers, who are feminist souls, we're especially told those lies about ourselves in God's name. I think about just all of the railing my father did against feminists. And that was fueled on by Rush Limbaugh and his whole feminazi dialogue.
Oh, the patriarchy full form. Yeah.
And I came of a certain age and had to really unpack everything in my, as part of my healing process, to be like, this is bullshit. Yeah, I bought it as the truth for so long because I think when things are delivered to you in a scary way, especially until we know better.
Well, and assigned by God.
Yeah, God says.
Yeah.
Well, God is very open to interpretation because I do believe God shows up in many different ways. And if that,
I don't think he is small enough. Yeah. Is small enough to get offended, is small enough to be judgmental, is small enough to be the asshole that I see all over social media. And the funny thing about it is they're trying to convert us by this anger, by this rage. Yeah. And it just goes, I've seen this before. I've seen this. I'm a pro at this. I know what you're going to say. I know all of those things because that's what were said to me my entire life.
For sure.
But
For
once you dissect that shame, once you realize it's based on lies, which is why I outline them all in my book. Like, okay, let's walk through this because I needed to know what exactly was a sin. What did it mean back then? What does it mean now? To really try to free myself and say, okay, this is based on lies. And I use the antidote is like someone telling me that I was short. You saw me, I'm 6 feet tall. If someone were to say I was short, I wouldn't even have believed it. That's ridiculous. But I believed that I was a piece of shit. I believed that I was ungodly, a heretic, just for being me, just for having a voice, just for wanting to be seen. Because as a woman, that's not allowed. And to know that that was all constructed by the patriarchy, based on agendas, on all of those things, it freed me. It completely freed me. It was like, oh, this is bullshit. I don't need to believe it anymore. Okay, now look, now where do I go? And then looking for the truth that is from the dawn of man to now, from birth to death. The only truth is love. So it was once I found that, once it was like, okay, this is where it's supposed to go. Then it became beautiful and not burdensome. Then it became freedom and not controlling. Then it became, I fucked up as opposed to I'm going to hell. I can make things better. Those types of things.
Completely beautiful. And to your part of your question, right, was how do you tell people they're in a cult? I don't think you do. I don't think we can. I think the best any of us can do is plant seeds and be ourselves. And this is a hard one for me. I want to unpack this because for a lot of years doing the work I do as a therapist, as a trauma trainer, and I hope I still keep this on some level, a compassion for what it was like to be a conservative Christian. Because I had two deconstructions. I would say my first deconstruction was leaving evangelicalism, and that happened when I was an undergraduate. So fortunately, I got out of that pretty quickly between the ages of like 19 and 21. But because that's also when my drinking problem and drug problem developed, once I knew that needed address, it's like, oh, because I fell away from religion, that's why I became a drunk. And no, it's because I had to finally cope with a new world and feelings because I had shoved feelings down for so long.
Trauma is the gateway drug.
Right. And then I dove headfirst into Catholicism at that point. And that deconstruction was a gradual process that really started in earnest at about 25. And then I'm still deconstructing. I think it's something you're constantly doing when you've grown up in that water of it all. And I think back to, what was it that helped me in those moments? Because I really wanted to love Jesus. Particularly when I was in my early 20s and I knew that the evangelical path was just hateful and abusive. Not a statement towards all evangelical churches or evangelical people, but the way it was delivered towards me
doesn't exist in our universe. So
it was hateful and abusive, and I wanted nothing to do with it. And what was also really inspirational to me at that time was I had a friend I went to high school with, and then my brother, even as a young teenager, was diving really into Catholicism as a study, really to show me how much my father and his church lied about Catholicism and misinterpreted the teachings of Catholicism. So I was really eager to dive in and learn more, yet I know for me, a big part was getting to get out of the bubble I was raised in and see the rest of the world.
Right.
So yeah, I do kind of laugh when I hear some very devout religious folks say things like, we don't want our kids going to college and getting a liberal arts education because it's dangerous. Yeah, it will neutralize and call your teachings out on their bullshit.
Right.
Because meeting I say kids, but young adults in my late teens and early 20s who were from other faith backgrounds, from other places in the world, from listening to really smart professors who just had a lot of beauty to share. My heart convicted itself in there's no way these folks are going to hell.
Right.
It just did not compute to me. And I know that's when I really, really, really started asking a lot of questions. And so I think we, as women who are doing the kind of work we do now, we speak our truth. We live by example. I'm still working on being as compassionate as I know I can be when I see folks who are stuck in ruts. And that's just part of what being a good therapist is, meeting people where they are. And I've worked with a lot of folks over the years whose spiritual and religious beliefs really do help them. And especially with what they've stated their goals are for therapy, I'm not one to deny them their beliefs. Yet, if they are seeking me out for psychotherapy services and they've expressed that they have certain goals, like recovering from the horrible nightmares connected to my trauma, I do have a duty to point out if I think some of their religious beliefs and devotions might be perpetuating or feeding into that trauma instead of helping them heal from it. And sometimes it's both. That's where it's really very tricky, because I do believe that being a very active Catholic at a certain point is what got me into recovery. But it really wasn't anything about church devotion that did it. It was people I met there who taught me about AA and taught me about God of my understanding. And Janet Leff, who's my first recovery sponsor, I met her in a Catholic setting. She's no longer with us. And she's the one who got me into see the importance of real therapy. And so I have had a lot of great things come my way through church. Yet I've also been grateful that I have been able to see the bigger picture as well, in a way I wasn't when I was a young person, just kind of stuck in that bubble.
For me, it was information.
Mm.
So, like, in fact, one of my early readers of the book asked me, why did you believe the new information that was coming in? Most people would have just disregarded it.
Yeah.
And it rang true to my soul. I mean, when I talk about in the book about how I saw this timeline of humanity and was like, what do you mean the Israelites weren't the only humans? You know, things started to fall apart. What I wish I would have had was someone there to cradle me as I was going through the cognitive dissonance pain, my brain hurting, you know, the embarrassment, feeling so stupid, the shame of believing this and giving it my whole life. I wish I would have had some comfort there. But because I didn't, and because of the way I was raised, is probably why I'm not the softest person about this. Someone said to me that I needed to, my book is dedicated to a boy who killed himself after the evangelicals told him that he was going to hell. And she said to me, talk like you're talking to Marcus. And I'm like, I am. She's like, what? Like, yeah. I'm not Meryl Streep. I'm not the comforter. I'm Cher. Snap out of it. Because that's what I needed. So yep. I know, you know, that's not going to work on everybody. And I'm even saying that I would have liked someone to comfort me. But even if someone was there saying snap out of it, at least it would have been better than doing it alone, right? I mean, I started 27 years ago before indoctrinate or deconstruction was even a word, before anyone was even talking about leaving the church. I had been so damaged. And when they tried to also damage my grandson, it was like, I'm not going to allow this anymore. Wow. So it's snap out of it, but that doesn't work on everybody.
Right. You backslider, you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just the information. And I try, you know, it's like, okay, if you have your, you know, if you're a cult member, if I give you this information, but so many just dig further in and go, no, I can't.
And I have this saying I really like. I talk about it in the book. Who's to say? Like, who's to say what any one human needs? One of the stories I tell in the book is of a really dear friend of mine from graduate school named Joy, who and she allowed me to use her name story with full blessing. And so I went to a very Catholic graduate school, probably one of the 5 most conservative graduate schools in the country on the Catholic side of things. And I received Joy as somebody who was like a true believer Catholic, but I liked her. I probably had a crush on her, honestly. And I knew that she just kind of got humanity in a way it didn't seem like a lot of my classmates did. So we really connected. But I remember in one of our school projects, she was up there arguing against the evils of secular humanism. And she was such a compelling speaker and whatnot. And then I lost touch with her after graduate school for a few years. And then we were Facebook friends with each other. And then she went off of Facebook for a while. And then when she came back on, she's married to a woman. And what? How did this happen? And then we reconnected, and I heard a lot of her testimony, her counter testimony, and I credit Stephanie Warren, who's the ex-evangelical Zennial on TikTok. Some of you may know her. She and another influencer talk about, this is my reverse testimony, because we hear that word testimony so much in Christian circles, but we also have a right to share our testimony of how we found a new life, a new truth. And for a lot of us, that means, like, I love God more now. And I feel more jazzed about the spiritual now because I am living in authenticity and not trying to keep the truth of me zipped in.
Now, I believe that if you have truly evolved into a spirituality, that God is undefinable.
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask you anyway, how do you define God?
God is, I think, to Jake, my engineer friend who recorded the audiobook, it's like, God is a river. I really like that metaphor. God is...
That's interesting. I say in my book about how life is the river. That's interesting. I like that. Wow.
There's a lot of words that I use as adjectives or descriptors for God: creator, the breath. I think God shows up in all of the elements, as the earth, as the water. God fundamentally is love. And this is a theology that I really credit to my yogic studies. And so if you could let me geek out for a moment.
Go for it.
A lot of people will ask, is yoga a religion? And, Christians get up in arms. Certain Christians get up in arms about yoga. Well, the correct answer to that question, yoga predates religion.
Yep.
Because the teachings of what's called Sanatan Dharma, or universal truth, universal Dharma, that fed the early yogis, existed before Buddhism, before Hinduism, before Jainism. And Sanatan Dharma was the teaching that whatever cannot be refuted is what's true. So love, the idea of your will, not mine, be done. And you could think of that as the universal flow, the river of life. It doesn't have to be a being. That this divine essence, many of us call God, fundamentally lives within us. It can live in anything, is not in a tabernacle, is not this old guy up on a cloud. And I believe God can do whatever the God needs to do or can do, including becoming human. And when I look at what still interests me about Christianity, it's that teaching of the incarnation. I think that's the true miracle, right? So God can be whatever God needs to be. And I'm very blessed because in my story, I never stopped believing in God. And I remember when I was in that period around age 18, 19, really knowing just how abrasive the evangelical God was to my world and my experience. I was up on the top of a mountain in Colorado. The first time I saw the Rocky Mountains, and I had a cousin say, how can you look at something like this and think it just happened? And I really had probably my deepest first moment with this expansive God up there. And so it's very precious for me to see God as creator. And then going back to Sanatana Dharma, when I really tapped into that, the things we agree on are what is truth.
Right.
Like love and this universal divine flow, this creative flow. And everything else is just a detail. I'm getting shirts made that say Jesus is just a detail.
There you go.
Krishna is just a detail. Buddha's just
Oh, dear. I'm getting so much kickback from evangelical pastors about me eliminating the divinity of Jesus in my book. And that if you get, I'll have to have one too, and we can take pictures together.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters. I think when we worship Jesus, we don't follow him. And we are supposed to follow him in order to do so.
Right.
And to add on to, I love the Vedas. When I discovered the Vedas and all of the wisdom that was in there, it added so much more of a foundation. But they were demonized so early in the church. Those are the pagans throughout the Old Testament. And in my ignorance, I was actually looking for someone to do a show on Hindu, and I called him a pagan. Didn't think it was bad, just thought that was, and he was like, Sherry, we need to talk.
Yeah.
But again, learning those types of things, but it's so beautiful. It predates everything by like 5,000 years. Abraham, all of them. Even Zoroastrianism, which predates Judaism. So when you have all of those things, I say that if you had a Venn diagram and you took all the world's religions, the main ones, there's some crazy ones out there, but they will all intersect at love and let go. And like you said, the river, the surrender, thy will be done, O Lord, get into the flow, those types of things. Those are the only two cores that align with everything. And I think everyone, if they're not living in fear, can agree with that. It's not easy to surrender. It's not easy to say thy will be done, O Lord. It's easier now because I have a lot more faith, ironically, but that is all that matters.
That's what our journey led us to, making those to say conclusions, because they're all the mystery is always revealing itself, I think someone said. So here we are.
We were sisters, Jamie. I knew it.
I know the river's flowing.
Yes. And on that note, I actually had a friend say to me that he really appreciated the river analogy that I used, but that he had to get out of the river for a little while to ground himself again.
It's beautiful.
It was totally beautiful. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing an actor course. You need to do that, because that was something that never even dawned on me. Again, the indoctrination of evangelicalism, productivity is next to godliness, all of those things. And when he told me that, I was like, wait, that was an option?
Love it.
I didn't even know that was an option. But life kind of forced me to do it, right? With the cancer and all of those types of things. So if you don't get out of the river and really learn and absorb and figure out who you are and where you fit into this universe of love, I think we end up drowning.
Mm-hmm. And playing with the river metaphor, something I got to in my personal therapy is I know how to float and I know how to swim.
There you go.
I know when action is needed, and I know when just letting the floating happen is needed.
I mean, even when I was sick last week, I was berating myself, going, you have stuff to do. And again, I know that's part of the indoctrination. I know that's one of those levels. And even at this ripe old age of way too old, I am still like, no, I need to rest. I need to rest my body. I need to be able to do these types of things. And then I hear in the background, but you're not being productive. You could be doing something productive. And that way, and it's when you disregard your soul so much that you have to keep it moving so you don't think, there's a problem.
That's the essence of dissociation. Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what would you like? I'm going to push your book, everybody, and you have to go buy it. What would you? Thank you. You got to send me a copy.
This is the advanced review copy.
And
The final cover is a little more colorful than this, but this is the one I have. And this is me in my Catholic school uniform.
oh wow, I love it. I had everybody who attended my book launch party sign my copy.
Oh, how beautiful. Yeah.
So yeah, they could that way I would have one copy of, that everybody, I signed all theirs, but that way they could sign as part of my journey. I love it. Cherish it. And
Yep.
it's marked, so I won't be stupid and sell it. So what would you like to, let's see how to say this. Encouraging people to pick up your book, what will they learn in doing so?
Well, I will say a feature of it. I believe memoir works best when the person reading the memoir is invited to consider their own story too. Because I've read some memoirs that are just kind of either pure narrative or pure what we jokingly, but kind of seriously call trauma porn. Like, and this bad thing happened, and this bad thing happened. And it doesn't really go anywhere or get me thinking about things. So one of the therapies I practice is expressive arts therapy, and it's using any creative process at your disposal, like writing, visual art, dance, movement, drama, playing music, listening to music, and working with the blend of them to help you express. And so some of us may naturally gravitate towards more forms, different forms, but the ones you might most resist have the most to teach you. Like visual art is the one I'm not good at, but because I've not really approached it with any kind of seriousness, I can go real deep. So at the end of every chapter, because the book is organized thematically, it's 9 chapters and an afterword poem. And so like one of the chapters looks at the theme of sex, another one looks at marriage and the family, one looks at moral development. And so there's it's not a chronologically organized memoir. But at the end of each chapter, I invite people into an expressive arts practice. And I give folks options between writing is what I tend to most lean into, because my hope is everybody can be inspired to write their own memoir. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a memoir that they share with the public in any way, but memoir writing is spiritual practice. And I will have a companion course coming out in the new year on that topic, memoir writing as spiritual practice, for people who want to start exploring what a lot of these themes may mean for them. So I hope on one hand, and I say this in the preface, if you're a memoir reader, you may just appreciate it as a story, which is great. But hopefully you'll learn something about what spiritual abuse, religious trauma is and how it shows up. I think now in modern America is the time to be learning it, if you're not aware of what spiritual abuse and religious trauma is and how it can show up. Because I do believe that what happened in my home is a microcosm of what's going on societally right now. Yeah. And it even makes me laugh that this, if I can get more political than I have, that this current Supreme Court that sits in the United States is populated with 4 of the most devout types of Catholics.
Right.
I wouldn't even say devout, because you can have devout Catholics who are like Joe Biden, right?
Right.
But just 4 of the most theologically dogmatic and conservative Catholics. And sometimes I sit back and wonder, do you realize how many of these evangelicals think you're damned?
Right.
Who don't like Catholics, but they're used
to Israel.
Yeah.
And the evangelicals are rooting for Armageddon, for the destruction of Israel. It's insane. It's insane.
Yes. So I've often shared that my story taught me that there's a lot of things the two religions, the 2 expressions of Christianity hated about each other. Yeah. And they agreed on hating a lot of the same things.
Right. Right.
And that is what I see happening. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're supposed to love. So let's look at all of the hate. Let's focus on hate. We should do this. It's crazy. But I think it's pretty cool that you brought up the creative therapy, because before the show, Patrick and I were talking about what he's learning in his school orientation. He works at a school and the creativity was what they're bringing back, because reports show that the more creative a child is, the more they are able to access certain parts of their brain and understand and develop critical thinking. So the fact that you include that in your book and as part of the therapy, I think is beautiful, and it sounds science.
Creativity, yes, correct. And as a therapist, as a clinician, I believe that, and I teach it. And yet I will say, as a survivor, and I guess I'll end this on a positive shout out to my parents, because I've talked a lot of criticism about them here. They did give me a lot of gifts in the way of creativity. They were actually dancers and musicians in a Croatian folk group when they met.
Oh,
That's
wow.
where their families are from. And so I did grow up with a lot of singing and music lessons and dancing. And my mom will joke, she said, your head was always in a book reading when other kids were outside playing. And as soon as I really learned how to write, I loved to write. And so my connection with those creative and expressive practices really did help me have some outlet for emotion growing up.
Yeah.
And I think I made this passing comment at the beginning of the interview. I do not get triggered personally by praise music. I will still dance to it and sway to it. And I know to the Lord words, and I dig right in there in it, because that was the thing I enjoyed the most about, especially an evangelical service. There's a lot of things I like about Catholic masses, and the music is one of them. I've done Catholic folk choir, and I know Latin chant tones both from having liturgical music experience. And I wrote a piece as a blog a few years ago called God is in the Music. And so I believe that creativity and expression was a way that this loving God that I've been talking about showed themselves to me when I was really kind of stuck in this trap of religion.
Interesting, because I just had a memory as you said that my mom used to say that Lucifer was the angel of music. And that is how Satan really got in. I had taken down all my Journey posters.
Oh God, Journey, no.
Yeah, the REO Speedwagon was satanic. And so when you even demonize music and those types of things.
Well, secular music was definitely a no-no, because
I still love the Imperials. Do you remember the Imperials?
Yes.
Them? I have them on my iPod. My ex-husband was the drummer in the church band. So church on Sundays was a concert for me. And I loved it. We would dance, evangelicals. We would dance and sing.
And years later, I went on a yoga retreat with the teacher Ram Dass. And at any time he would teach, he brings Krishna Das, the kirtan artist, with his harmonium doing call and response. And there's a lot of dancing and singing and waving. And at one of these retreats, a lady came up to me. She tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "You grew up evangelical, didn't you?" And I said, "Does it show that much in how I wave my hands and how yet that comment was very moving for me, because there's this term in yoga. It's a form of yoga called bhakti, which is love and devotion.
Yeah.
And I get chills even talking about it, because it's all bhakti. Whenever we connect musically, whether it's in a praise song or in a call and response chant, and I believe a lot of secular music has such spiritual and loving themes that folks I grew up with just won't see. Funny story. I think it's funny. A few months ago, I went to a Bruce Springsteen concert, whose music I really grew to love as I came of age. And yeah, there was, of course, an evangelical protester outside of this. And I'm like, "You're protesting Springsteen?" Like, come on. Springsteen is like going to church for me, especially so much of the themes he taps into. So
right. Well, and I mean, I saw U2 and Muse about 10 years ago. That was a religious experience. When you have 85,000 people singing in unison and looking at all of those things. And that was one of the things that dawned on me. It was like, wow, I feel like I'm in church. It was just the community. It was the oneness. It was all of those things that incited us, excited us, got us feeling all of those things. It wasn't necessarily the music. The hymns bother me now. The
They
whole
do.
walk in the blood, the whole, I'm a piece of shit. Those things, I can't sing anymore. I
Yet I
still love
do,
Saving Grace.
but I do love how you can twist the lyrics on that too. That saved a soul like me
Yeah.
instead of saved a wretch like me. And some of the like Power in the Bloods. Yeah, I may sing them ironically, kind of rolling my eyes.
Right. And
Uh,
like the first beer and hymns I went to 3 years ago, I'm looking at the words and I looked at my neighbor. I'm like, these are horrible. I
yeah,
used
I
to
don't.
sing this.
I do not agree with the theology,
Right.
obviously, in a lot of them, but I still have fond memories of being able to sing them at the top of my lungs. And
Well, I don't identify or love the ideology of most rap music, but man, I can get down.
mhm,
Down.
yep. And yeah, so I have a playlist on my Spotify. Actually, my friend Rachel and I started it together. So Rachel is another therapist who does teachings and trainings like I do. And we were on a trip once. I think we were in North Carolina somewhere, sharing a hotel room. And I forget even how it came up, but she and I broke into Onward Christian Soldiers in perfect harmony.
Now I'm gonna have that song stuck in my head the rest of the
Right.
time.
And we looked at each other like, oh God, where did that come from? Like that's still in there. That's still visceral somewhere. So she and I made a playlist that we call Jamie Rachel Roots. And it's all of our Pentecostal praise music that we liked or still had some kind of connection to. Now, funnily enough, Aaron, who is Rachel's partner, grew up Catholic. And I know the Catholic hymns too. So Aaron Jamie Roots or Jamie Aaron Roots playlist together, and
There you go.
they did this TikTok with me last year where they would call out a hymn. One would go Protestant, one would go Catholic,
Oh my God, I love it.
and there's some crossover hymns to be sure.
Yes, there are.
And I would just drop in because that to me was the joyful part of it that kept me afloat, and that's why I love creativity and expression so much.
Yeah. I love music. It can change your emotion like that.
Mhm.
But I have to do this in the morning.
Oh, I see somebody put it in.
Well, we are at the top of the hour, Jimmy. This has been such a phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much. Any final words, and where can people find you?
Well, it was my pleasure having a talk. Well, the easiest thing to go to is myname.com, jamiemerich.com, because that links you to all of my projects, the books, some of my resources sites. If you're a professional therapist, Institute for Creative Mindfulness is where I have information about psychotherapy trainings, continuing education that I run. And then another good site that I like to shout out of mine is Redefine Therapy. That's everything I've done for free that's online. You can find it Redefine Therapy. So I repost all of my interviews there, articles that I've done that are connected to each book, some like trauma-informed yoga and meditation videos I have up there. So that's Redefine Therapy. It's a really good site for the public. And then on the socials, if you search my name, I'll come up. I'm Dr. Jamie M on Instagram. And on TikTok, the handle is Trauma Therapist Rants.
Love it. I will add all of your links to the YouTube channel so they will all be able to have it. But don't forget this one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we connected at Goose, and I'm glad we were able to make this conversation happen.
Most definitely. I'm going to send you backstage and close the show. Thanks again. You were wonderful.
Sherry, bye.
Another great show. I love talking to like-minded people who are focused on love. It makes a difference. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your input. Next week's show is on cults, and I am chatting with Becky Garrison. Don't forget to check out my book. I want to know your thoughts. I want to know what you think about it. I am thinking about publishing a second edition already with a trigger warning for the first section. So there's that. But get it. I want to talk to you about it. If you like the show, subscribe, share it, all of that good stuff. And thanks again for watching. Have a wonderful week. And as always, walk in love. Mwah! See you next week.